Hey all, how's it going? It's TLC, and we're just kind of, looking today into kind of the rankings, how I do it, right? Anyway, my rankings of one of my favorite, if sadly probably the most underpowered of any of the D&D 5e classes, which is of course the Barbarian. Which I know might be a surprise to some people who, especially there might be a couple of DMs out there who go, oh, I have a, Barbarian in my party and it takes forever to kill them. And what do you mean they're the most underpowered? They are. The Barbarian is probably the most underpowered 5e class right now. And I'll go a little bit, at the end here as to why I think so. But, the primary part of this video is just, hey, if you want to play Barbarian, as long as you know what you're getting into, as long as you know that, hey, this is probably going to be one of the worst classes you can pick. But if you are desperate, if you want to, if you have a character concept in your mind and a Barbarian just seems to fit it the best, then here's the ranking system. Kind of split up here. Now, obviously, this is only going to be Barbarian classes that are in official public published work. So any UAVs, any of the Unearthed Arcana stuff, I'm not including. I'm also not including the what's it called, like the Battle Rager from Swords of the Coast, just because I find that most DMs don't like I don't even feel like most people even know the Battle Rager exists. And it is very situational anyway. If it was a powerhouse, maybe I'd include it, but I just don't think it is, so I don't think it's worth it. So it will also not be on the list. But without any further ado, let us go ahead and get started. So here's my tier list. If you are familiar, if you are someone who this is your fifth video of tier listings of D&D, then this scale shouldn't be new to you. I will be going from negative to positive just because I feel like, get the shit out of the way first, save the good stuff to later. So my tier list goes F. If something is in an F tier, then that means that it is not even worth playing. Not only do the abilities hardly work the way that they were probably intended to, but they tend to go against themselves and actually end up hurting you. You would not have a good time playing this class. D, they are very situational. So, it's not to necessarily say that the subclass is, god awful. You may come into certain situations where, you will be very happy that you went with this subclass. The problem is that there has been so much power creep in D&D and in 5th edition, thanks to Tasha's, thanks to Monsters of the Multiverse even, thanks to Strixhaven, maybe not so much with Strixhaven, but thanks to Fizbane's, and other books, published books now, things that the Barbarian and things that certain classes, subclasses in the Barbarian used to be exclusive to and used to be very, very beneficial, you can now just have if you choose certain races to start out with. Which is why, we're going to find some classes here, some subclasses in the D tier. C tier is situational, but depending on the makeup of the party, depending on where the setting is, you could be mediocre. You could be okay. But that's about as high as you're ever going to be. You're never going to feel like, oh my God, I am the sole powerhouse of this party. It's instead going to be like, hey, thank God I chose this subclass for this one situation. It really helped me out. But as soon as you're out of that situation, it don't matter. B is mediocre, but it has such good benefits that maybe you do choose it, and maybe you would actually be better in very specific situations than maybe even say my A tiers or my S tier even. But again, most of the time you're going to be in that mediocre range. A tier, good choice. Solid choice, you can't go wrong. There might be one that's better, and odds are it is not going to be a surprise to anybody familiar with 5th edition or the Barbarian class, which class is in my S tier. But that is not to say that you cannot have an amazing time in A tier. A tier is very good. It is a marginal difference. I think there are some classes where, the gap between D to C is huge. C to B, huge. The gap between my A to S, not so much. And S is, of course, the powerhouse. It is the one barbarian class that I feel like everyone and their dog always ends up picking, because we always end up being the super awesome gamers that we are. We tend to find where, the best of the classes ends up being the best subclasses, and it's the one we always end up choosing. So this is my tier list, and with that said, let us go ahead and get into it here. Alright, so for F tier, none. Hey, look at that. Alright, this is thankfully one of the classes of D&D where I really could not find any of the subclasses that are that are so worthless that there's no point in playing them. Even the worst of the classes here at least have something beneficial. So that is not going to always be true. And when I get to certain other classes, we're going to talk about how there are certain subclasses out there that are so bad that I don't think anyone plays them, and I don't think you ever would, unless you're just totally willing to bypass, being good, just for the sake of role playing. Which, if that's the case, as a DM, I love that. I would love to have a player who's like, hey, I don't care if I'm good or not. I just want to role play. But I find that even those players, especially if they're in a powerhouse of a party, they start to feel like they are, so many steps behind that they end up, sending you that text, DMs, we know what, that text that says something like, hey, I don't care if my player dies. Can you please, just say next combat, feel free to do what you will. And I find that generally speaking, we are willing to do that. Alright, so anyway, F tier, none, thankfully. Alright, so D tier. Alright, remember, D tier here, this is the one that, it's not the worst, but there's a lot that is missing. And right out of the gate, we have a D tier. First off, I want to say, thank you to Brian Simi, I don't know if that's... artwork I'm drawing directly off of Google, so I give credit to you, Brian. If for whatever reason you happen to see this video, thank you for making super awesome art. I totally swiped it off of Google, and I'm now using it. And it is to show my Berserker class. The Berserker subclass, the very first subclass, was one of the very first subclasses ever introduced here in 5th edition for the Barbarian, which is probably why it is in the lowest tier. There has been such power creep as time has gone on that there is only one original subclass, I think, in even the whole book, that is still to this day top tier, and it's on the list, and we'll get there. But as for the Berserker, aka the Frenzy Barbarian, it is D tier. I have here its abilities listed out, but to put it simply, and again, I try to just kind of put like one little quote up there at the top just to kind of symbolize why it is in the state that it is. And to put it simply, it's just not enough bang for your buck. What it asks you to do, what you have to pay in order to do your abilities, is just so much pain, especially if you use it multiple times, that you don't get enough out of it. But we'll talk about it. So as this Berserker, right, as a Berserker Barbarian, at 3rd level, you get to go into a frenzy state of rage, which means that when you do so, during this time, and I guess my picture must be covering some of the words there, when you are going into your rage, you get to go into a frenzy rage, which basically just means that, hey, you get to attack as a bonus action. You get to attack with your primary melee weapon one extra time as a bonus action. However, when your rage ends, you suffer 1 level of exhaustion. Now, at low levels, this seems powerful. This seems broken. And an old, original 5e, before all the extensions came out, and before all the other books came out with better subclasses, this was very powerful. This was a very powerful ability to be able to attack, depending on twice, almost right out of the gate, at level 3, that was really, really powerful. Attacking 3 times at level 5, that's really cool. The problem is this, all right? It's this last part, all right? It's the level of exhaustion. Now, I forget off the top of my head exactly which ones it goes, but I know it's something like, when you suffer 1 point of exhaustion, you have disadvantage on ability checks. At 2 levels of exhaustion, you have disadvantage on, I want to say it's your attacks. 3rd level, your speed is halved. 4th, it's like disadvantage on saving throws, anything else. And 5 is like you are catatonic, and 6 is you're dead. There might not even be 6. It might even be, I think it may just be 5. I think when you get 5 points of exhaustion, your character just dies. The point is that it's safe to assume that, okay, as a barbarian, and especially since the barbarian is not designed to do too much except be in combat and be a monster, you can suffer 1 point of exhaustion and you won't really feel that bad. You can have disadvantage on ability checks and you won't really feel it too much, because odds are you're not the one who's going to be doing all the checks and stuff anyway. The problem is that if you are playing with a DM who throws multiple combat sessions at you, who throws multiple combats in a single session at you, then you may find yourself very quickly in that 2 or even 3 exhaustion level situation where, okay, now you're always having to go reckless. Now you're always having, just for a straight roll, you're having to do this, and now all of a sudden, you feel just how big of a burden this ability takes you. And sadly, it doesn't get any better. So for instance, at 6th level, here it is, 6th level. All right, you are out of tier 1, you're going into tier 2 of play. All right, tier 1 is levels 1 through 5, tier 2 is 6 through 10. All right, what do you get? Other classes at 6th level, they get all these super awesome abilities. What do you get? You don't get to be charmed or frightened while raging. And if you are charmed or frightened, when you rage, it ends. Or you be an elf. That's it. I mean, granted, I know an elf doesn't make you immune to being frightened, but just by choosing an elf or one of the, and thanks to Tasha's, now that you have the ability to just pick a class and throw the stats wherever you want them, you can be an elf barbarian. And now you don't even have to worry about this. So the fact that not only, one, does this not assist you in your frenzy rage at all, not only does it benefit that at all, so it's kind of this weird, like, to me, that is the story of the Berserker. To me, the Berserker is like someone took what we would think is like the old Nordic Viking barbarian and was just like, okay, how can we put what we think of a Viking looked like and then make a D&D character around them? Which sadly means you have these, this hodgepodge collection of puzzle pieces that when you actually sit back and look at it, you realize they don't fit. Why, how does mindless rage work with the rest of this class? And not to mention, when you think about it, in game-wise, this only works while raging. So you can still be completely charmed, which, by the way, is exactly what happened to me. I was playing a Frenzy Barbarian, and it was the very first Barbarian I ever made. It was a low-tier game, and so I thought that this Frenzied ability would be super awesome. And I was like, okay, and not be charmed and frightened. We went up against a vampire, and it charmed me. And I knew, the player knew, that, okay, all I have to do is rage, and the charm goes away. The problem is that if you're someone who tries to not metagame, if you're a player who tries to not do anything too stupid, in terms of, breaking that trust of, okay, Lee knows, I know that what this does. I know that if I rage that I can break this charm person. But my character wouldn't know that, because my character doesn't know the charmed. And so even though I knew what it would take to break it, I didn't find it until something else happened. I couldn't bring myself to actually rage, which is why this whole thing is stupid. And again, half of it gets negated if you just choose a certain class. So a half ability at best, and it's what you get at level 6, All right, level 10, you're halfway there. You're halfway to level 20. All right, what do you get? Intimidating presence. At 10th level, you use your action to frighten someone. When you do, or when they hear them, they have to make a wisdom saving throw against your charisma. You're a barbarian. I have the oddest feeling your charisma is either your dump stat or pretty damn close. But sure, it's going to be against your charisma. Hey, at least you get your proficiency bonus, I guess. You can use your, you can make them scared, all right? You can make them frightened. And you know, as long as they are a certain distance away from you. Here's the problem. All right, here's the problem with this. Is one, it's using your charisma score, which is probably one of the lowest. Second, it's using your action. Are you seriously at level 10 going to give up 2 or 3 attacks? Because I think Frenzied, I think you even have to use your attack action. I don't think you get to just like, hey, I'm a bonus action, I do this thing. It might. I may have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure you have to use the attack action and then bonus action you can use the weapon. The problem is that this, as a barbarian that is so focused on attacking things, when would you ever use this? Now, you could say like, oh, well, I'm going to do it outside of combat and make them frightened of me. Okay. It's still using your charisma, and really, in the grand scheme of things, like I don't know how your DMs do it, but I have the oddest feeling that if you just try to intimidate somebody, you will make them frightened out of combat. You know, a 13 intimidation check versus a, hey, they failed your intimidating presence, you're going to get the same effect. And since it's using the same skill, you know, if this was, you know, if intimidating presence, say, used your strength or your constitution, then that would make this ability so much better, because you're using something for an ability check that usually requires your charisma, which for a barbarian is probably one of their lowest stats, and instead you're using it for one of their best. That would be great. But again, you're giving up an action to do something that is either one, not going to really assist you too much, or two, is something that just an ordinary intimidation check would have probably sufficed. So again, another one of those abilities that just lackluster. You're not really getting much. All right, and lastly, number 14, big 14, the last thing you get out of this subclass. Make it good, right? Make it awesome. Make it something super, super great, because it's the last thing you get. And what do they give you? When you take damage from a creature that is within 5 feet of you, you get to attack that creature as your reaction. Again, sorry, my picture is cutting half of it off. But at 14th level, when you take damage from a creature that is within 5 feet of you, you get to retaliate and attack that creature using your reaction. Okay. Or you take the Sentinel feat. Granted, Sentinel only works when they attack somebody else, but you just take a feat, and you get pretty similar to this. Also, the fact that it's using your reaction. Now, granted, as a barbarian, our barbarians are notorious for having dead reactions, which means, you know, they're not having to worry too much about, unless someone comes in and then leaves their space, they're not the ones casting counter spells. They're not the ones who are cutting words or anything of that nature. So, granted, to have them be able to attack something maybe that one extra time, maybe it's important. But again, there's feats that do very similar. There's other classes that do this, that, hey, if you get attacked, something happens that is way, way better. And the really biggest part here is that it's 14th level. I don't know how your games usually go, but what I generally find is most D&D games usually stay in tiers 1 through 3 and usually end in tier 3. They usually end between levels 10 to 15. Most games don't last that long. So to have this as your capstone, to have this as that level 14 ability, I mean, it's okay. It's not horrible, but it's so situational. It requires them to attack you, which I mean, thankfully you're the Barbarian. You'll be able to soak up the damage, but it's relying on so much. It's taking away your reaction. It's requiring that they attack you first. They attack you on their turn. And to be honest, most monsters, I feel like, especially at that high a level, like you're having monsters weaving in and out of you, you're probably going to get an attack of opportunity about as common as you end up using this ability. And yet this is your capstone. This is your level 14. Just overall, like I say, it's a lot of things that maybe if they would have done a little differently, maybe if things would have gone a little bit better, maybe it couldn't have been so bad, but definitely not enough bang for your buck. Hence why it is in D tier. Alrighty, moving on through. Also in D tier is Wild Magic. Now this one's a little kind of contentious. I think that some people, I think the Dungeon Dudes, when they did their tier list, highly recommend, go check them out. Really cool YouTube group. My problem with Wild Magic, and I think they have theirs a little higher. I think theirs was like C or even B tier. However, I have a problem with the Wild Magic, and again, I think that this stems from the fact that I just think the Barbarian is a really weak class. So you need things that are willing to propel you to be better and to match, the Hexblades and the Paladins and, and all these other, even fucking the Clerics even. And the Wild Magic does not do that for you. So for instance, I do not have my third level abilities up there because it was too many words, especially considering what the third level gets you. But to put it simply, at third level, if you choose Wild Magic Barbarian, one, up to your proficiency times a day, you get to, as an action, feel if there is a magic item within 60 feet of you. If that's not the definition of situational, I don't know what is. It's for most of your gaming career as this Barbarian, you are only going to be able to use this 2 to 3 times a day. Because again, most campaigns usually stay in the 1 to 2 to topping off at third tier. So your proficiency bonus is never going to get higher than 4, and it's probably going to mostly spend its time at 3. So 3 times a day, you get to feel if there is a magic item near you within 60 feet, and it cannot be behind total cover. So depending on how that's worded, depending on how much of a dick your DM is, they may say, hey, if someone is wearing a magical belt and they wear a cloak around it, you don't get to feel it. You have to see it within 60 feet. It cannot have cover of any kind. That's up to your DM, but point is that, again, very situational. I don't know how often you would actually use it or how often it'd be very beneficial. The other thing it lets you do is when you rage, and this is kind of the key thing about this class, is when you rage, you get to roll on a D8 chart. And again, I don't have the chart up here. It's actually a kind of cool chart. I found some of their things to be kind of unique, but it was really wordy and it covered the whole screen, and I just didn't want to have all that. So if you're curious, go Google what the full list is, or go look in Tasha's, because that's where this class is located. But you roll on a D8 table, and the D8 table tells you what happens when you rage. Some things could include, hey, all the creatures around you take, a certain amount of damage while you gain temporary hit points at the same time. It could be teleportation. It could be, hey, you restore, magical things to other people. There's a number of things that are kind of creative, and I kind of like that some of the things, I'm glad that they didn't just take random things off of like the wild sorcerer, and throw it on here. But there's a problem, okay? And this is why I am putting this in D tier. It is because for how cool some of those abilities are, they only happen when you rage, and they only happen once. And sadly, most of the time, most of the things that they do are one-time use. So I think, for instance, like the very first, like number 1, if you roll a 1 on the D8, if I recall correctly, it is you deal 1d12 necrotic damage to creatures of your choice, thankfully, within 30 feet of you when you start your rage, and then you regain 1d12, or you gain 1d12 temporary hit points, for that turn. And then when it's gone, it's gone. That sounds really, really cool. And at 3rd level, it is. The problem is one, that means that you have to, in order to fully use that ability, you have to be within 30 feet of an enemy when you rage. Maybe it's possible, maybe it's not. I don't know, but anytime you have to choose, or anytime you have that specific thing in there, then that means it is situational. Secondly, it only happens when you rage. So again, here's an ability that is only going to help you when it is in combat. If you are not in combat, the whole point of you being, of being a wild magic barbarian is pointless. You don't get anything besides sensing a magic item within 60 feet. So it's decent. Like, there's some things that are really creative. What I think, what I think they could have immediately done that made it better is if you got to choose. Hey, here's a D8 table. If you want to roll, truly be wild, go for it, or pick one. Because then, by having that choice, it's like, okay, I had no choice. I am starting my rage surrounded by 4 enemies. I'm going to use the one that does a area of effect damaging ability when I start my rage. Or, there's one that's teleporting. I think there's one that's like, teleports you 30 feet, and then you get to do something, if I recall correctly. Okay. It's like, oh, hey, I'm 70 something feet away from, the enemies. I can choose this ability so that I can teleport 30 feet, still have my movement, and still go do everything I want to do. That would have immediately made this class better. But again, I know, that's not what they were going for. It's literally called the Wild Magic Barbarian for a reason. It's so situational that you're going to end up being like, wow, I'm a wild magic, barbarian, and I'm just not really using it too often. Whereas some of these other classes get things that they get them all the time. Not really working out for me. So that's why it is here in the D tier. All right, 6th level. At 6th level, you can harness your raw magic to bolster yourself or your companion. As an action, you can touch one creature, and you can confer to one of to that creature one of the following benefits. 1, for 10 minutes, the creature can roll a D3 whenever they make an attack roll or an ability check, and add the number to a D20. Why it's a D3, I don't know. I don't know if they just thought that, hey, yeah, there's this die that does exist and we don't really use it too much, so we're going to give it to the barbarian here and use it for this ability. I don't get it. And I don't like it. I guess maybe for this next bit, if they don't want to do it that way, then they can do this, or they can roll a D3 and the creature regains 1 expended spell slot of the level, which equals the number rolled or lower. Once a creature receives this benefit, however, they cannot receive it again until after a long rest. And you can do this as many times as equal to your proficiency bonus, and you gain them all after a long rest. This is cool. This is a cool effect, and it almost bumps up, for me anyway, it almost bumps the Wild Magic Barbarian up to at least a C tier. The problem is again, 1, it is at 6th level. You do not get it until your 6th level. Secondly, once a creature gains it, they cannot gain it until a long rest. And lastly, it's a D3. So let's just go ahead and assume here that you have an average party makeup. So let's say you have a barbarian, let's say you have a healer of some kind, let's say you have a dedicated spellcaster, and then you have another melee-based person. So a monk, a ranger, a fighter, another barbarian, whatever, or a rogue. Point is that this one, roll a D3 and regain an expanded spell slot equal to that. That's actually really cool, and that's really powerful. Imagine being able to just, give the wizard another ability to cast Fireball, at 6th level. That's really powerful. That's really cool. But again, once you've done this, the creature cannot do so again until after a long rest. You end up like, it sounds really cool until you realize that, okay, odds are this effect is only going to really help 1 or 2 of my party members, and once I give them that, they do not get as a long rest. At 6th level, a wizard has the ability to just innately, during their short rest, regain a spell slot of third level or lower. You know, 1 third level, a second level, and a first level, or 3 first levels, thanks to their Arcanium recovery. This isn't as powerful as you think it is, or more specifically, it's not something that the wizard and the sorcerer and other spellcasters already have the ability to do. And thanks to Tasha's, now classes like the cleric even have the ability to regain spell slots. That was something that that clerics didn't used to be able to have, and I thought it was kind of balanced that way because they got to choose their spells every single day. But now even they get to regain spells. So this ability sounds really cool, and it is, but when you really just kind of stop to think about it, it's so situational, and it's not really doing anything that the other classes can't do anyway. And as for the D3 to the ability check and number rolled, the average on a D3 is 1.5 to 2. If an attack misses on a 12, odds are it's still going to miss on a 13. If a saving throw is failed because a player rolled a 9, odds are it's still going to be a fail when it rolls an 11. So the averages here on D3s are so low. This is so minuscule. Even just making it a D4 would have been better, but they didn't. All right, number 10, Unstoppable Backlash at 10th level. When you are imperiled during your rage. Imperiled? Sure. The magic within you lashes out. Immediately after you take damage or fail a saving throw while raging, you can use your reaction to roll on the magic table and immediately produce the effect rolled. This effect replaces your current wild magic effect. This is what I'm talking about when I say that I wish more subclasses did things like this, where it's like, hey, we know what makes you a wild magic barbarian, so we're going to give you abilities that back up what you are. Unlike, say, the Berserker, where it was just a whole bunch of random hodgepodge, shit put together, this actually feels like a subclass that, hey, we are building a subclass, and these are the things that make you what you are, so we're going to support that. The problem is one, it's a 10th level. So again, this is the end of your 2nd tier, beginning 3rd tier play. Odds are your campaign is probably, wrapping up, whether it's because you guys are reaching the end of your campaign, or it's because people's schedules are starting to get screwy, and you're lucky if you play once every month or two. So point is that it's late in the game. Secondly, again, you have to roll on it. So for all you may very well end up with an effect that doesn't help you. In fact, it could do the exact opposite. You're betting the die here. For all maybe you really need to stay put. Whatever the situation is, maybe you really need to stay put, and someone hits you, and you roll on the magic table thinking that, okay, there's these other abilities that would be super awesome, I'm going to use them. And then it tells you that, oh, you landed on number 5, 6, I forget which one it is. You have to teleport 30 feet. You have to. You have to teleport somewhere else. And I guess you can tell the DM, like, hey, can I teleport here? Like, I just want to teleport right back into my same spot? Maybe. Maybe your DM would let you do it. But, the fact that then, this effect also replaces your current wild magic effect. So maybe you rolled the perfect one for you at the start when you first raged. The fact that it's all up to chance. Like, it's cool, it's interesting, but in terms of power level, in terms of actual usefulness, it's leaving so much up to chance that, to be honest, you will probably find situations where it's like, I don't want to use this ability because I don't think it's going to actually help me. All right, lastly, 14th level, whenever you roll on the magic table, you do what Wizards of the Coast, what they always do whenever they give a wild magic table, and at 14th level, your capstone is, of course, you get to roll twice and choose which of the effects you want to do. You can still end up with 2 effects that suck. Or at the very least, 2 effects that would be more of a hindrance than a benefit. I guess it's better. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea, like, okay, I get to roll twice. Odds are statistically at least one of the 2 wouldn't be half bad of an effect for me to have. But this isn't whenever you want. It is only when you roll on the wild magic table. And remember, the only time you're going to be rolling on that wild magic table is either when you start your rage, so once a combat, or when you take damage or fail a saving throw, you use your reaction. I guess I should have mentioned that also. This means no attacks of opportunity. This means no proccing any of the fun stuff. This just, it sounds cooler than what it is. And I feel like that's the story of this whole subclass. It sounds cooler than what it actually is. So definitely D tier in my book. Alright. We are leaving the D tier behind, and we are going on into C tier. Alright, C tier, it is situational, it is underpowered, and it is when abilities just don't seem to meld too well. Right? That's kind of the best way to sum up your C tiers. Storm Herald. I place Storm Herald above the Frenzied, above the Berserker Barbarian, and above the Wild Magic, because at least some of these things, one, you get to choose. You know, I love when you get more choices. You know, it's like, hey, you know, you reach this level, here are some of the things you get, and you get to choose what they do. Secondly, they give you things that can actually affect you out of combat, which is a Barbarian. It's a big benefit, because I feel like 90% of Barbarian shit is just, hey, this is only effective in combat, which is why this immediately puts this above C tier. It's one of my least favorite Barbarians, but it at least gives you something more, I feel, than what the other classes do. So, Storm Herald at 6th level, or third level, sorry, at 3rd level you get your Storm Aurora. When you select this, you get to surround yourself in 10 feet of whatever, you know, amazing, super great environment you grew up in, I guess. You get to choose an area, and each one of those areas determines something, something, something. Alright, first off, this is coming out of Tasha's, so immediately you get to see that, you know, oh look, they learned. They're not putting this next to, like, say, your wisdom modifier or your charisma. It's actually something that's probably pretty decent for you. It's using your constitution, which is nice. Alright, if you choose Desert, all other creatures in your Aurora take 2 points of damage. This increases at 5th level you get to do 3, at 4th level, at 10th level you get to do 4, and at 15th level you get to do 5. And at 20th level you get to do 6 points of damage. Minuscule. Tiny, tiny bits, especially considering that at 15th level you're going to be fighting things that has hundreds and hundreds of hit points. Sure. I guess at least there is some scaling, but not enough in my opinion. But at low level, sure, maybe 2 is enough, especially if your DM uses, like, say, the minion rule. Although I'll be honest, if your DM is using the minion rule and you choose this class, they will probably stop using the minions. If you choose C, when this effect is activated, you choose one other creature you see in that Aurora, and the target must make a dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 lightning damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one, and again, that increases as you go. Now, one thing that I do like about this is that, you know, it isn't using, say, your action, right? It isn't something that, you know, you are forcing it to happen. But again, just like the Wild Magic Sorcerer, this is only happening when you go into your rage. Alright, it doesn't say every turn. Alright, it just says, you know... oh, sorry, here it is. Okay, the Aurora, when you activate this effect on each of your turns as a bonus action. Okay, so it is. So it does maintain itself, which is nice. So this is happening, you know, this is going to be way more consistent than your Wild Magic of D tier. But it is using your bonus action. So if you are a Barbarian who up until now has been relying on something like, say, you know, Polearm Master, then this is a nice little thing that you know, you can use over and over and over again. But again, it's pretty minuscule damage. You know, 1d6 lightning damage on a fail, half as much. So on average, you're looking about 4 points of damage, 2 on successes. Not great, not horrible, and it does scale again. And this one at least scales better than, you know, than our up to, than our desert one. So that's okay, I guess. Alright, and Tundra. When this effect is activated, each creature of your choice in your Aurora gains 2 temporary HP. Not bad. But it has awful scaling. Alright, again, you know, this is something, I mean, it is nice that this is, you know, every round. every round you can use your bonus action to increase to give a party member temp HP. The problem is again, that means that the party member has to be within 10 feet of you, and since you're the one who's probably the frontliner and probably up in the front the most, there's gonna be some people who just never get this ability. Your spellcasters. So overall, not horrible. I like the theme, but it just seems like the scaling is so bad that the best one honestly is probably the C, but even that's iffy. But hey, they tried. All right, 6th level, Storm Soul. You get a benefit. No, I don't know how your DM would do it. If I was running a campaign and I had a player who wanted to be a Storm Herald, I would probably say, hey, if you choose the desert as your thing, then I'm going to then that's it. That is your type. To me, it wouldn't make sense to me if my people come from the Badlands, we come from the the outback, this whole big deserty dune area, in the back of the mountains, whatever. But whenever I go into my Storm Herald, I summon Tundra and ice around me. That doesn't make sense to me. So I would probably say, hey, it's got to fit theme, and once you pick desert, then that's what you do. All right, you pick that, and that's what you get. So at 6th level, depending on what you chose. So at desert, you gain resistance to fire damage. And you do not suffer the effects of extreme heat. Oh, look, an ability that can help you out of combat. It's not best, but hey, it's okay. And as an action, you can touch a flammable object that isn't being worn or carried anywhere and set it on fire. That's kind of cool. You could, that's kind of up for the, up in the air for creative players. Hey, you never have to worry about, starting campfires, I guess. All right, for the sea, you gain resistance to lightning damage, and you can breathe underwater, and you gain a swim speed of 30 feet. Again, something really cool that helps you out of combat. And lastly, Tundra, you gain resistance to cold damage. You don't suffer the effects of the extreme cold. Moreover, as an action, you can touch water and turn it into a 5-foot cube of ice, which melts after 1 minute. Now, the last one, very situational. I don't know when you would ever need to turn 5 foot of water into ice, but hey, maybe, maybe that's something like, hey, we need to make a bridge across this body of water. Send out the Storm Herald, and they'll just turn 5 feet at a time into ice and just all the way across. It doesn't say that, if you do it to one, that if you do it to one 5x5 tile, that it stops when they move in and when you do it to another. So, pretty good, I would say. All of this is, again, this to me is what I like about D&D subclasses, is obviously they knew what made a Storm Herald and they tried to make it better. All right, 10th level. I always hate it when they look short, because that means they're not going to be very powerful. At 10th level, you learn to use your Mastery of the Storm to protect others. Each creature of your choice has damage resistant you gain from the Storm Souls feature while the creature is in your Storm Aurora. So basically, if you are resistant to fire damage and someone now is within 10 feet of you, they are now resistant to fire damage. It's nice, but again, it is very situational. And the reason it is situational is because you are going to be in the front. There is going to be plenty of party members that are going to be nowhere near you. So it's good, it's okay, but it is situational. All right, and lastly, 14th level, the Power of the Storm. You channel grows mightier, lashing out at your foes. This effect is based on the environment you chose, as is normal. If you chose the desert, immediately after a creature in your Aurora hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to force that creature to make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes fire damage equal to your Barbarian level. So at this point, it would be 14. Problem is that it doesn't say what happens on a success, so I'm assuming on a success they just don't take anything. And it is a dexterity save, which I find most monsters generally have pretty good dex saves, so this is probably not going to be used anywhere near as often as you think. C, when you hit a creature in your Aurora with an attack, you can use your reaction to force that creature to make a strength save. On a failed save, the creature is knocked prone as if it was struck by a wave. Pretty decent. And I like that it doesn't say anything about a size, so theoretically you could do this to a gigantic creature, and depending on how your DM rules it, rules is written, doesn't say anywhere that it can't be it's not creature of similar size as you or smaller. So I will say one negative though is that it does use your reaction. So again, no attacks of opportunity. And lastly, Tundra. When you choose this, you can choose a creature in your Aurora. That creature must succeed in a saving throw, or its speed is reduced by 0 to 0 until the start of your next turn, as if they have been magically covered by frost. Or you take the Sentinel feat and you hit them. That's again, this is something where it's like there are certain abilities that I don't know if maybe the Wizards of the Coast crew, they just forgot that there are feats that do things that their classes do. But yeah, overall, it's not bad. Sometimes I think the Storm, Herald, Barbarian, I think sometimes they get kind of the brunt end, because I think that when people think of a Barbarian class, they think of big, meaty, I hit hard and things die quick, which is not the case of the Storm Herald. Very few again, even the things that do the extra damage, like your third level ability choosing Desert or something, you're only doing 2 points of damage, 3 points of damage at a time. But it could add up. If combat ends up lasting, say 4 to 5 rounds at 5th level, if you're fighting, you do 12 points of damage by just being there. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's a big deal, in your campaigns. I just know for me, this is very situational. It feels very underpowered, and sadly, as the levels go on again, you just, this scaling is so awful. 3 points of damage at 5th, 4 points at 10th, 5 at 15th. Like, it's so baby damage that this whole thing just is not worth. The more that I read it, the more I just know that, yep, this is why this is C tier. I feel confident it's where it should be. Right. And with that, we are out of our shitty tiers. Is really the only thing I can think of claiming it. Thankfully, no F tiers. A couple of D tiers, C tier here. I will end it here with the crappy ones. Next video will be the good tiers. Our Bs, our As, and our S tier rank. Hopefully I will catch you in the next video. Till then, TLC out.